One of the things I've done several times in Bible studies, but I've never gotten to do in church because it's so hard to see and explain, is cover the geography of the Holy Land. And I thought, since I'm recording this little devotional ahead of time for my mini sabbatical, this might be a great opportunity for me to draw and be able to explain how the Holy Land fits together and why that's important for several of the stories that are in the Bible. Now, you're also going to be experiencing my fatal flaw as a pastor, which is my artwork and my handwriting. But I think still, if you turn around and think about what I say, and then you actually go look at some of these things on a map, you'll be able to put together kind of how things work. So first, let's just kind of think about the Middle East. And I'm kind of trying to draw. You can see, you're already seeing my flaws, okay? And you can think about the Middle East looking something like this, right? This is called the Sinai Peninsula. Down here is Africa. Okay, I can try to help you. This is the Mediterranean Sea, so it's blue. Okay, and then there's a sea over here and another sea over here. This would be kind of where Israel is. This way is Saudi Arabia, and then going that way even further, you would get to India and the rest of Asia. And then up here, this is Turkey, but then becomes Greece, becomes Rome, and all of Europe up here. Now, I start out with this little strange part of the Mediterranean Sea, really kind of zooming out on Israel to help you understand the importance of Israel. Okay? That if you want to trade between Europe and Asia and Africa, the way to do that on land is through this little stretch, because over here is very hard desert, very hard to travel through. Israel is the land bridge between these three continents. That's why so many superpowers have wanted to dominate this space, because it's important for trade. In fact, Israel is known for a ton of birds that actually fly south for the winter and then fly back north through there, because they're not strong enough to fly over the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. They actually will go through Israel and then spread out across Asia and across Europe. Okay, so it's a major tradeway. Israel's been called the sacred bridge at times because of its importance in terms of trade. Now that we can fly, now that we have much better boating, it's not the same kind of trade route. But in ancient times, it was critically important. You could trade from Egypt all the way to India, but you had to go through Israel. You could trade all the way up into Europe from Egypt, but you had to go through Israel. So that's the importance of the centrality of the place. Now, let me just draw Israel for you. Again, draw is a loose term here. Okay? The coastline of Israel kind of goes like this. And there's a sea that's up here, and a river, and then there's a sea that's down here that looks kind of like a weird glove. And so this here is called the Mediterranean Sea. This up here is the Sea of Galilee, or the modern name for it represents the fact that it's shaped like a harp. Okay, and then this down here is the Dead Sea. Okay, so there's not a lot of water in Israel, but there is water on both sides of Israel, Sea of Galilee, and this would be the Jordan River going down this way. Jordan just means from Dan, and it's because the actual Jordan River starts with a number of rivers coming, number of little streams coming together in the area of Dan, where the tribe Dan lived. And they come down into the Sea of Galilee and then come out of the Sea of Galilee and go all the way down to the Dead Sea. Now, by the time they get to the Dead Sea, the water gets so salty that nothing can live there, hence the name the Dead Sea. So down here is Sinai, and it's bordered by the Mediterranean Sea, the Dead Sea, and then down here the Red Sea. So they talk down there about the Med, the Red, and the Dead. And that's Sinai, surrounded by the Med, the Red, and the Dead. Now the way Israel works is along the coast here, and this is small, by the way, size of Vermont, New Jersey. I mean, teeny tiny. compared to Pennsylvania, way smaller. More just western half of Pennsylvania. Okay, so the top of Israel from Erie to Washington. A lot of you have made those trips. It's not that long. Okay, along the coast here is a nice flat at sea level called the area called the Coastal Plains, where there's like a lot of growth. This is where the Philistines were when David came along. And then what Israel does is it has a coastal plain, and it goes up pretty far here. And then it gradually starts getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And there's this area called the Shephelah, which is these ridges that form going up into the mountains. And then by the time you get up in this area here, there's large mountains. Okay, they're called the Central Mountains. Okay, and city of Jerusalem is right here. It's up in the mountains. And so that's why they're called the Psalms of Ascent. When you walk to Jerusalem, you're always walking uphill, because literally from wherever you go, you're walking uphill to Jerusalem. Okay, down in this area, once you get below Jerusalem, down in this area you get desert. Very, very extreme desert called the Negev Desert. Okay, but up through Jerusalem it's really mountainous. Again, going into the Shephelah, these stretches down this way into the coastal plain, into the Mediterranean Sea. So if I was drawing Israel from the side, like if I flip this up for you, it would start with a small coastal plain that then started going up into the mountains. But then after Jerusalem, it dives way down. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on the earth. It's the farthest below sea level that the earth goes, unless you're underground or underwater. Which is crazy, because right over here, it's at sea level. So it gets really, really high, and then it dips way, way down, so that there's a bar on the Dead Sea called the lowest bar on earth. You can't go any lower than that. And so if we were looking at this side view of Israel, it would dip way down. And what this actually is called the Rift Valley, and the Jordan River flows down the Rift Valley. It's a rift between tectonic plates. It's actually where continents come together. Okay, you got sort of Asia, but then this starts getting into the continent that will be Africa. And so they get pretty good earthquakes sometimes in Israel because of this. So this dips way down, goes way downhill, the Jordan flows way down to the Dead Sea. And then it pops back up on the other side, again, rather steeply, to become the Transjordan Mountains, and then they sort of flow out into the desert to the east. Again, rough desert that's hard to live in, hard to travel through without modern technology the way we have it. So in this Rift Valley are some important places. Important for us is down here would be Jericho. That's where the Israelites cross over and fight Jericho into the land. Jesus also came through Jericho and did miracles there on his way to the cross. And so near there is the community of Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. It's kind of over this way. John the Baptist did his baptizing down here in the Jordan also. Now, the Central Mountains, I tried to draw it a little bit this way, actually go this direction a little bit as it gets into the north. Okay, the city of Joppa is over here, modern day Tel Aviv, but Joppa where Jonah goes down to the boat, it's there. But the mountains sort of turn, and then Mount Carmel is here. Mount Carmel where Elijah went and faced off against the prophets of Baal. But after that, there's a little bit of a valley here. So it can, again, really grow things. It's called the Jezreel Valley. Not very big, but essentially important for the world of Israel. Things that happen fighting over this valley: story of Deborah, the story of Gideon. Saul's sons are killed fighting for this area. There's a pass here that gives you access to this land. There's a city there called Megiddo, and so the Battle of Armageddon. Okay, this is such a fought after place. The prophets look for here in the book of Revelation John looks for here to be the final battle. Okay, and then up in here, you get more hills, okay? Not as steep as the central hills, but these would be called the hills of Galilee, the Galilee region, okay? From Jerusalem down would be called Judah. Okay, that's where the tribe of Judah was, then the nation of Judah. In the middle is called Samaria at the time of Jesus. And so Jesus does a lot of his ministry up in Galilee, the northern part. Only a couple times comes through Samaria and then works down here in the Jerusalem area in Judea or in Judah. So when Jesus is born in Bethlehem, Bethlehem is kind of a sub-city of Jerusalem where things are grown for Jerusalem. But he is brought up here in the Galilean hills, a town called Nazareth, overseeing this Jezreel Valley. We remember the Sea of Galilee where Jesus calmed the sea. Lots of stuff happens around here. The city of Capernaum is up in the north where he heals Peter's mother-in-law and where he lives for a lot of his ministry and travels around in this region. So that is how Israel is laid out. So here's my encouragement to you. When you read a story in the Bible, try to think about, your Bible probably has maps in the back. Go back in the maps and take a look at what you see. Okay, when you hear about the Philistines fighting David, it's because David's kingdom is growing from Jerusalem, and the Philistines are over here. And so there's a lot of battle in this region. When in the book of Judges, there's all this action, it's because people are fighting over the Jezreel Valley and the importance of that valley. Jesus does a lot of his ministry up here around Galilee. One of the interesting things there is these major trade routes I was talking about. One of them came right close to Capernaum and then came down through here across the Jezreel Valley to Megiddo. And then somewhere up in here also split off to go up into Europe, which meant there were a lot of travelers, a lot of people that Jesus would meet. And when Jesus goes across the Sea of Galilee, this area over here was often non-Jewish. Okay, this side of the sea was Jewish, this side of the sea was non-Jewish. And so when Jesus crosses the sea, he's actually feeding a whole other group of people, or doing miracles, or speaking to a whole other group of people. So as you read your Bible, pay a little bit of attention to the maps. Pay attention to where you are. You might want to look at one that's not drawn by your pastor. You may want to draw your own and start as you are looking at your Bible, reading your Bible, marking places that are important for the Scriptures.